Hi, I'm James Eade of the Eade Foundation, and I'm here to bring you coverage of the third GM IM Norm tournament and the ninth and final round. And there are GM and IM norms at stake. So I'm going to test my tactical abilities to bring you some of the games. Okay, let's try doing this. And I hope that works. Okay, so this is board one. And I am Bryce Higlon versus FM Austin May. All right, so this is on board one. But you know what? I've got to tell you a couple of things that's going around here. And that is Maria Malikia is going for an IM norm. She needs a win. Or a draw would get her a women's Grandmaster norm. So let's see how she's doing. She's got black against the Grandmaster. Now that's normally kind of scary. But what are you gonna do? So if she can manage a draw, she would get a WGM title. Winning would be a lot to ask, but we can root for her. So what we need to see here is, okay, I'm going to ask one more question of the people that I am talking to. It seems like Kirk on board four, playing black here, has achieved an IM norm. Oh, that's pretty cool. And let's see. I'm thinking now, okay, Balaji, let's look at Balaji's game. Balaji is playing, he's an international master. He's on board two, playing FM Eric Lee. Okay, so FM Eric Lee seems to be aggressively taking the action to him. But Balaji seems to be, I'm quoting Tom Langland, the tournament director now, and saying he's playing in beast mode in this tourney. So let's catch up. And we'll come back to this game. But let's look at the results from round one and see that Balaji has black one. Round two, Balaji has white one. 2 out of 2 is not bad. And Balaji on board five, won again, 3 out of 3. Whoa! Against the green Grandmaster. In round four, he won again, 4 straight. Holy smokes, the beast mode is right. Round five, nicked for a draw by a Grandmaster. Nicked for a draw. Okay, round six, let's see where Balaji was. Where is he? Ooh, took his first loss of a tournament. I am Constantine. Constantine has managed to derail Balaji. And in round seven, another draw. In round eight, where's Balaji? A win. Oh, and against Maria, who needed a draw, but could not get it. So she's stuck in round nine. So that is what, 5 wins, 1 loss? Wow, that is a very good plus score. Wow. So let's check on this game again. Oh. He's taking advantage of the pin. The knight is pinned to the queen, so knight takes g2 here. It is not exactly a good move. Queen g5 takes a queen d2 would be very depressing for white. So I think is black trying to trade off pieces, and he's saying, look, you got that pawn chain. Ooh, did we think of this? Ooh, F4. F4 says something's going to happen and one of us isn't going to like it. Which one is it going to be? That is a way of breaking the pin. So you have to examine E takes F4. Does that allow knight takes G2? And then the subsequent exchanges, do they favor white or favor black? Black has a little bit of a pawn structural problem because you can see the queenside pawns on the B file are doubled. It's a minimum weakness, but it is a weakness. But black is saying, I've got a light squared bishop on C8, and you've got a pawn chain that was F3, E4, D5. Now it's just E4, D5, but it still weakens the mobility of your bishop on C2. And the piece's power is tied to its mobility. And if my bishop on C8 can move to more squares than your bishop on C2, then I've got the stronger piece. So I think that I've got a good chance, but I'm wondering, did black sufficiently calculate all the combinations that result from the move F4? Let's see. We'll turn back later and we'll see. And let's check in once more. There was a grandmaster draw on board 5, so we'll just look at that, and we can see these two basically said mutual respect. Let's draw our game and not waste any more energy, because this is a 9-round tournament and energy is at a premium. Man, game after game after game, you're pressing and pressing and thinking and thinking and concentrating and concentrating. So no shame in agreeing to a quick draw there if nothing is at stake. They're both grandmasters. So what they're doing is putting their GM titles on the line for others to challenge them. So I tip my hat to all the grandmasters that are participating in this tournament, because they're giving others an opportunity. But of course, they don't want to roll over and die. So back on board 1, what do we have here? Let's start at the beginning, which is usually a good place to begin. Okay, E4, knight C6, not a common move, and it tells me that that black is saying, I'm going to try to play something unusual in order to mix it up and make it unclear imbalance from the beginning. And white very calmly says, well, okay, knight F3, independent move, it belongs on F3, why not play it there? So he says, okay, we'll transpose back to a normal game. This is a real Pez, which has been played too many times for me to count with all of my fingers and all of my toes. It's more than that. So this is all very standard. This is all very standard. Castling is the open. So now you open the position a little bit, and white says, let's open it some more. And okay, I want to close that E file, which is threatened to be ripped open, and my king is on it. So I'm going to close it. And he says, okay, but I'm going to put my rook there anyways. It's going to be open. And I want my rook there. It's obvious I want my rook there, so will I not play it? B5, typical maneuver. Rook takes E4. Didn't he have to move his bishop back? No, he says, I'm going to put this, and oh, wait a minute, don't you have to take the bishop? No, I'm going to attack the rook. But what's going on here? So he says, okay, now you got to move the rook, right? No, knight takes. Threat after threat after threat. And nobody's doing what you expect them to do. It's a great start to this game. Knight takes E5. Rook takes E5. He says, ha ha ha, now you have to take my bishop. So 2, 4, 7. The pawns are even, but look at the white pawns. They're so nice. They're so pretty. They're so aligned. Look at the black pawn structure. Not so nice. Not so pretty. And he says, by the way, I'm not going to let you castle. He says, well, you can't stop me. He says, well, maybe I can. Look at that. He says, no, I'm going to castle. You can't stop me. This is all right. So I'm just going to go about my business and develop. This is all right. Well, I'm going to shatter your queen side. It's going to be shattered. No, it's not. Well, I'm just going to castle that. Okay. But look at that c5 square. It kind of wants me to play my knight there. So I'm going to threaten to. And if I can block that diagonal, that bishop on e7 will no longer be protecting that a3 pawn, and I will take it and say, ha, ha, ha. So what do you do? What are you going to do? I'll attack your rook for starters. What are you going to do with your rook? Ignore it. This is really well played. This is one move leading to another, and every move that's being played is not the move that I would right off the top of my head have played because I would think I'm being attacked. I must move. No, the counter threats. It says I could take that rook, but what if I just, if you take bishop on a3, why don't I just take on f4? And then you'll be embarrassed. Ha ha ha. Says, okay, you're right. I'll protect it. Says, all right, then I'll play bishop h3. Why, you might ask? Well, I don't want you to play knight takes bishop e6, which would be potentially embarrassing for me. Okay. My rook is still there to be taken, but I can scarf up this pawn while I'm at it, and that's where we are. Really exciting chess. Notice that the long-term advantage is 2, 4, 7 pawns for white, 2, 4, 6 for black. So there's a material advantage. The element of force or power or material in chess is in white's favor until bishop takes e5. Now he says, okay, now you're going to be a pawn up, but I'm going to have a rook for a piece. So isn't that to my advantage? I think it is. So I'm taking your rook now. And he recaptures f takes, which is pretty much the move, gotta say. And once the queen moves, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not entirely sure what's going on in this game because it's a very interesting position. So before I pass any judgment, queen f5 looks good. That was the move I was thinking about. It ties the queen to the defense, the white queen to the defense of the c2 pawn, and queens don't want to do guard duty. They want to do anything but guard duty. So that looks like a good idea to me. Now let's keep going. Let's keep going with all this action. I can't keep up. What? Why didn't he take it on g2? Because now that f pawn is pinned to black queen. Remember, the black queen on g5 was exploiting a pin along the c1 to h6 diagonal. And holy smokes, 1 minute later, white is exploiting a pin along the same diagonal. Because the queen was not protected on d2, so black was exploiting that. Now the queen on d2 is exploiting the fact that the queen on g5 is not protected. So you can't play f3 or f takes g3 because the queen would be hanging. So he's going to be able to say, well, I'm going to play g takes f4. And instead of having that immobile pawn structure on e4, d5, which was suppressing the power of my bishop on c2, I'm going to have a pawn structure there. e5 is in play, opening up my the bishop on c2 to be magnificently placed, attacking the king side where black's king is. So let's do a quick count of pawns. 2, 4, 6, 7 for white. 2, 4, 6, 8 for black. That pawn on f4 and that pawn on g2 both look like they're going to be captured. So then it would be 7 to 6. And yes, both kings have a little bit of space around them and it seems susceptible to attack. But is that really true? I'm thinking probably not. Neither king is in grave danger, even though there are open lines. What an interesting turn of events by White. I was starting to think that FM Eric Lee was really, dictating the pace, and then all of a sudden, I think this is kind of tough. And the time position out for Black, the time is now about twice. White has twice as much time, even a little more than that, than Black does. But time is not yet of the essence. There's still plenty of time for a long, deep think, as long as you don't take more than 23 minutes and 15 seconds. You can think for 5-10 minutes without any cost. It's still, don't move rashly. Don't move before you're ready to move, before you've decided on the move. In this kind of critical position, Black will show me something that I'm missing because it looks like White has developed an advantage at first glance to this commentary. All right, so let's check in with Marie. Remember, she just needs a draw to secure a WGM norm, but she does need a win to secure an IM norm. Now, she got one in the second of this three tournament marathon. So really, really would like another one. But what is this status? Count the pawns again, because that's always the first thing I do. 2, 4, 6, 7 for White, 2, 4, 6, 7 for Black. There's no material imbalance. Now, another element is in chess is space. Who's got more space? Neither side has penetrated enemy territory. And so you look towards the center, and what's going on in the center? Well, White has one pawn occupying e4 and attacking d5. But that d5 square is in dispute because there's a Black pawn on e6. So it's not clear who's controlling that. Now there's another square in the center on e5. The only piece attacking that is Black's bishop on d6. So, but that could go away in no time. So that's who's controlling that is not clear. And d4 now is definitely being contested because there is a pawn on c5 that can capture the pawn if it moves to d4, but there's a bishop on e3 protecting it, can recapture. So that d file can open very quickly, and that's where the king is. So it seems logical that the last move was rook hd8. So it prepares the king to run away, as we say in chess. And so let's start at the beginning here. Knight f3, knight f6. So this is kind of an English normal type of setup, and this d5 strike is normal. And e4 is a very normal because now he's saying, I want the center, control of the center, and no matter what you do, I'm going to have a little slight edge in the center. Black is saying, okay, but you traded your c pawn for my d pawn. I'm going to trade my c pawn for your d pawn, or you're going to have to give me control of d4. So it's an open question. Now this is an interesting move and it's consistent with having to play for a win because there's lots of ways to play for a draw, but she wants that IM norm tournament and in this tournament, and so she's saying I'm going to play more aggressively than I otherwise would if I was just going to settle for a draw. So White says, okay, but now look at I've got 3 pieces developed. You've moved 1 piece 3 times. I have an edge in time. The element of time we also call development. If you can get your pieces out faster and aimed more effectively, more quickly than your opponents to an attack, to a level and an attack against your opponent, maybe a weak square, maybe a king safety issue, whatever it is, development, a lead in development, is an impermanent advantage, but it is an advantage, at least temporarily. If you allow your opponent to catch up, it can just go away. But if you can maintain it, you start dictating what your opponent can and cannot do. And when you're responding in a defensive fashion, your position tends to become more passive, and the attacker's position becomes more aggressive. So this in chess, we've learned aggression versus passivity. You'd rather be the aggressor, almost all cases. So this knight at d6 check, it's basically saying, I said A, so I'm going to say B. And king e2 is very provocative, says, I don't want your knight there. If you go back to b4, big deal. And what did she play? Knight f4. Well, that makes sense, right? Check. Now she's moved that knight once, twice, 3, 4. This is the 5th time she's moved the knight, but she has robbed white of the ability to castle. Now, is that worth 5 moves of one piece? This is a question that's open. So king to f1 is pretty much forced. You don't want to give that pawn up on g2, but white is saying, so what? I've still got 3 pieces out. You've got 1. Now I can't castle. It's true. Now that's a 6th move. But you notice that there was a possibility that white was going to play d4, open the attack on that knight on f4 from the bishop on c1. Or the d pawn moves to d3. It's kind of a free move because you got to move the knight again or protect it somehow. So yeah. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 moves. That's a big advantage to give in terms of time. The element of time in chess is important. So that's like sacrifice. And what you got in return for that sacrifice of time is robbing white of the ability to castle. Is that good enough? So d3 is played anyways. Now it says, okay, I'm going to catch up as quick as I can. Now you see those knights, the pawn on c5, the queen on d8, they're all attacking that d4 square. So they're all saying d4 is mine. Black is saying d4 is mine. Now, if I can't castle, I got to activate my rook somehow. And hey, look, the position is a little bit open on your queen side. You probably want to castle king side. So h4 is a natural move. So it's just, I got this d4 square. It's an outpost for my knights. Knights love to take over outposts. They're so effective if they can't be driven away by pawns. That's why we call it an outpost. You can't drive it away with pawns. So if a knight gets there, it says, okay, I'm centralized. I have maximum mobility. And maximum mobility translates into maximum power, maximum force. Knights are happy on outposts, especially when a knight is supporting it. That's like, I got this outpost and I'm going to keep it. Whoa. She says, no, you're not. Take it away right away. But the other one says, oh, I'll just replace that other knight. And you know what? I looked exactly as powerful as that one did. Ha, ha, ha. Says, okay, all right, you can have that d4 square, but what about the 3 other central squares? You got no say in. I'm going to take advantage of that. Bishop to f4, attacks the e5 square. Activates the bishop, develops the bishop. It's hard to criticize such a move. So e6 is played. Now, see, this is a little bit passive because black is saying, I got to complete my development, but there's no place for me to bring my bishop on c8 into the game unless I just clog up the works with bishop to e6, but then it's going to be very hard to develop my bishop on f8. So I'll develop my pawn. I'll put my pawn on e6 so I can develop my bishop on f8. But look at the mobility that the loss of mobility that the pawn on e6 creates for the bishop on c8. And a piece's power is tied to its mobility, and if you make it immobile, you make it less powerful. So bishop on c8 is a little bit annoyed with black at this moment. Why did you do that? You made me less powerful. And white says, oh, by the way, I'm going to have some threats against your king. Knight c7 check is a threat that black should not ignore. So now all of a sudden, both knights are gone. That outpost on d4 is still there, but there's no knights left to occupy it. Oh, black says, oh, that was such a big square for my knights. But white got rid of them. Said, but maybe they'll get rid of my bad bishop too. Queen a4. Oh, this is my chance. Get rid of the bad bishop. Oh, good. And white says, yeah, sure. Okay. And black says, okay, let's trade more material. And white says, okay. All right. Because you know what? I still got a little bit of an advantage in the center. And with all that material up, the fact that I couldn't castle my kings on f1, big deal. It's now getting to the ending where the king should be active, should be a fighting piece. Rook c1, bishop d6, bishop e3 says, hey, what about your c pawn? So I'm not really retreating. I'm not costing myself time. I'm attacking and developing at the same time. So, all right, we got to take time to develop it. And it says, see, I wanted my king e2 on e2 all along. So I'm happy. Now we saw rook hd8. That's where we left it. And f4 has been played. So white is saying, I've got more space. Because although no piece or pawn has moved into enemy territory, look at what white has done. It says d4, d5, e5, f5, g5 are all under attack by my pawns. If you'll let me play g4, I'm attacking all along that rank. And I'm going to keep pushing. And you're going to have to start retreating. So white is saying I have an edge in space. And this is the way I'm going to take it. Space is another element of chess. So it looks like white has a slight superiority to me. Now f5 is a wonderfully thought out strike, I think. Because if you can fix black's pawns on dark squares, for example, after e5, then that bishop on e3 all of a sudden has fewer squares to go to. And the piece of power tied to its mobility, if its mobility is decreased, then its power is decreased. But white's probably thinking, okay, but yeah, I'm going to get d4 in, and my bishop's going to still be strong. And it's an interesting thing. It's a very committal move, f5. It's fixing the pawn on f4. And she did not want to allow g4, where that strength of the addition of space, the advantage in space, would have started to really bear down. So white is saying, okay, I'll play h5. Now I am in enemy territory. If you want to take on e4, by all means do. And I am now officially got more space. Now, is this going to be enough to win? We'll see. Black's saying, I can hold this. I am unafraid. So let's check out the action. I am white, if I'm black. So now Kirk has already got his I am norm. So congratulations. That's a wonderful outcome. And congratulations to all the organizers. Mission 360, Bay Area Chess, Cal Chess, all the organizers, all the people that put this tournament together, because somebody has gotten an I am norm tournament. An I am norm in your I am GM norm tournament. And that is a major accomplishment. It's a very difficult thing to do, and the opportunities are few and far between. So giving people the opportunity to do this is just tip of the cap. Hats off, because very proud of the people who have done this, put this all together. It is not easy to do. There are a lot of FIDE, the World Governing Organization for Chess is called FIDE, after the French. It's a French acronym, Fédération Internationale d'Échecs, and it's basically got some rules and regulations that control the outcome of such tournaments. So you can't just willy-nilly play what you want. You have to follow these regulations. And that's why Tom Langland, the president of Cal Chess, an international arbiter, he's FIDE approved to run tournaments like this that have these requirements. And they know that Tom will run this tournament according to their specifications. They have confidence in him. He's certified. And, some of us say certifiable, but he is certified by the World Governing Organization to run these types of tournaments. So we have to point that out in order to say, well done, Tom, for doing all the work that was required to get that certification, to be able to run a tournament such as this. Because not only do you have to have players representing multiple federations, you can't just have all US players, for example, to qualify, and you have to have a certain rating requirement in order to qualify. And these are FIDE ratings, not USCF ratings, not US chess ratings. So all of this has to be done according to the specifications of the World Governing Organization of Chess. And Tom has that certification so that they will, when he fills out the paperwork, and part of his job is doing paperwork, and no one likes paperwork, but he has to do it, and he does it. So tip of the cap to Tom. And now this position looks a little bit, okay, count pawns, 2, 4, 5, 2, 4, 6. So black has one pawn, but an advantage. But look at the piece placements. Okay, black has a battery of straight moving pieces, starting with the queen on g6, rook on g7, rook on g8. Hitting g2 as hard as it can be hit. However, it's adequately protected. And white has just put the pressure on the f5 pawn, the knight and queen combined. So he says, okay, part of my powerful battery on the G file has to give itself up to play a defensive position. Rooks do not want to defend pawns, but you can't let pawns go. You've already, you can't let get the pawn back. That's your pride and joy in this game. Your advantage is material. And players like Grandmaster Larry Evans and Grandmaster Yasser Seirawan always said, if you want to give me a pawn, I will take it. And they will grind you down in an ending and win. The pawn is sufficient. And players of that caliber hand, a single pawn is often sufficient to win. So this is a big material deficit if you're a great player. It's not so much a big deal if you're an average club player, because a pawn, who knows how the game's going to go. Some tactical oversight might decide it later on and make the pawn completely irrelevant. So there's still a lot of chess to be played in this game. All right, so let's swing back, see if anything has changed on board one. Great deal has changed. What has gone on? An exchange. Okay, where did we leave this? Okay. I think we left it pretty much after queen f5. I think that was where we left it. So white played knight d3, rook e8. It's a logical move because the rook was under attack by the a3, and putting it on the e-file seems like a good place for it, so it's logical. So far, so good. Oops, what are you going to do with that drunken sailor? That bishop on h3. I'm going to play h5 so I won't lose it. I'm going to be able to play bishop to g4. But, you know, you kind of wanted to hang on to that. But you can't. Okay, so now what? 2, 4, 6, 7 pawns, 2, 4, 6. So white has an extra pawn, but is also down the exchange. There's a rook for a bishop. Rooks usually roughly 5 pawns, bishops roughly 3 pawns. So 3 plus 1 is 4. So we say having the rook is better than having a piece and a pawn. A whole lot better? No, but a pawn's worth. And in the strong player's hands, a pawn's worth can be decisive. So let's see how this went. Rook to f1. Putting it on the f file seems like you can't really go wrong. And the queen retreat there seems logical. You're not going to, you know, you could play at h4 and try to mess things up on the queen side, but you're really not going to be able to. Because queen g2 would hit the d pawn. You end up playing there anyways. So it's like, you know, might as well go there now and keep that pawn on h5 instead of advancing it to h4. And very interesting game. And I'm not going to call who's doing better because it's not clear. But black does have the edge in material. Unit of force that is a little bit better than white's. What does white have in compensation? Let's see. Now, where did we leave this game off? We left this game off after king g1. Now it's just kind of complimenting white on white's play. So let's see what's happened to see whether or not I was interpreting what white was doing is correct. Okay, rook e7. All right. Well, the rooks obviously belong on the e file. Putting pressure on that e pawn. Okay, I'll go along with that. And queen takes. This is very interesting to me because he's saying I would like that pawn structure of f4, e4, d5 without the queens, even more than I do with the queens. And black says, yeah, but. Okay, so he's saying, yeah, go ahead and trade queens. And then what I'm going to do is keep your pawn on e4, which blocks the bishop on c2. Now, however he captures, he's going to try to keep that pawn on e4, getting in the way. But we still want to look at, okay, what is really going on here? 2, 4, 6, 7 pawns, 2 for white, 2, 4, 6 for black, and one of them looks like it's going to fall. Oh, 2, 4, 6, 7, sorry. One of them's going to fall. So it'd be 7 pawns to 6. And black's pawn's a little bit weakened with the doubled pawns on the b file. So this seems like a clear endgame advantage for white to me. So I think white is still in beast mode, frankly. Let's see. Okay, this was the idea behind h5. I think we left off on h5. And so, you know, I think at 4 was played and h5 was played and then e5. Now, this is just really plain. My heart goes out to black, just giving every possible chance to win this game. This is a break. Something's going to happen. It might be good, it might be bad, but I can't just sit around doing nothing. So I'm going to break. Good for you. That's a courageous move. Pawn takes. F takes e5. It pretty much, I'm not going to say it forces, because I've been told that it's not true all the time, but this was recaptured. Did look like it likely recaptured me. Okay, so he says, all right, I'll take that pawn that you've left unprotected. And Black says, okay, then I'll take this pawn. All right, so what has happened? Instead of the pawn center being pretty well fixed, it became very fluid. Like it can't get much more fluid than this. Pawns can take each other, and on two different files, it's like who's going to take who, which way you're going to take, something's going to be captured. And so this is a very fluid pawn structure. Now this has been resolved. All attention has gone out of the center. We have to evaluate this in a completely different fashion now. There's a 3-on-2 majority for Black on the queen side, and a 3-on-2 majority for White on the king side. The kings are in the center. So who knows if the queen side or the king side is going to be where the action is. Oh, now, one of the differences is Black's pawns are in 2 islands and White's are in 3. Now, this is a slight disadvantage for White's pawn structure. However, to compensate for this, it looks to me like g4, g5 is possibly a threat. Now, if you can play h6 and maybe not, so, what's going to be played here? I think this explains the next move, h6. He doesn't want to allow Black to play h6. So, now g4, g5 is again in the air. And so White is saying, I'm going to activate my 3-on-2 pawn majority faster than you can activate yours. This will give White the advantage. And that little isolated D pawn on a half-open file, yes, that is a weakness. And yes, theoretically, you can exploit it. But you're going to have to pay attention to the passed pawn that I'm going to generate on the king side more than you want to. So G6 has been played. All right. Now, we have created a pass pawn that's potentially a protected pass pawn on h6, which could be decisive in the ending. It's very advanced. Now, White does something that I did not foresee. I did not predict. I would not have predicted right away. Rook f1, hitting the bishop, taking the rook's protection away from the pawn on h6. He's telling me, anyways, that, you know what, it's adequately protected. I want to get things mixed up and put some pressure. If you retreat that bishop, I can penetrate along the f file. And I might play g4, g5. But notice those pawns would then be on the dark squares again. It's a very interesting ending. 2 rooks and a bishop are still a lot of material. But we are talking more end game than we are middle game. There are still tactical possibilities with this much material on the board. The most obvious threat is rook takes bishop. Excuse me. I'm going to get rid of that. And, sports fans, I'm not going to tell you, I know exactly what's going on in all of these games. This is very, very interesting. These games are very, very hard followed. Really been enjoying watching them, and I hope you are too. Very, very difficult position to evaluate correctly for a guy like me. Now we know that Kirk playing Black today has already got his IM norm. So he's already glad that he played in this tournament. Without question, he's glad. So where did we leave off on this? I think we were looking at this position. And we said, okay, we saw rook f8. That's right. Oh, b4 right away. Whew. So he's saying pretty much, if you take en passant, c takes b3, knight takes b3. Where does your knight go? And knight takes, then I can play one of my rooks over and pin the knight to the king. You can't protect it. I'm going to take it. Okay. We're pretty much saying, okay, you're right. Even though the pawn on a3 can be captured, that just may lose you 2 pieces. Don't want that. So, you know, a piece and 2 pawns is not worth 2 pieces. So that would be a bad trade. All right, so again, interesting chess. Look at the black attacking on the king side, had that wonderful battery set up along the g file, putting maximum pressure on g2. But white was able to defend that and said, well, what else you got? Black said nothing. So the action is swung over to the queen side. And so black says, okay, you're right. Okay, I'm gonna have to give up something to get something here, obviously. And I'm gonna play knight b3. I might end up having to give you that pawn back. Because black, remember, is a pawn up. You might be saying, okay, you got me, I gotta give back a pawn. In the meantime, I can set up a strong enough defense to discourage you from further queenside nonsense. So a good hard fight on board 4. Let's take a look back at it, see if there's been any action. Okay, there has been some action. All right. We left off here. And white says, you know, I don't even want you to think about playing c5. So I'm going to just take that off the table right now. And black says, you know, the rook on e8 is on the same file as your queen. So that pawn on e5 looks really important and scary, doesn't it? But you can't move, you can't capture, I'll take your queen. So I'll play f5. Now, can he get away with this move? Yes, obviously. There's no way white could capture it. However, I would call your attention to all the white squares around the black has these pawns on white squares around his king. They cannot defend the dark squares. So f6, g7, h6, g5 are all dark squares, and white's pieces could possibly settle on them and attack the black king. So it's a committal move too. Back on f7, you know, it wasn't quite as exposed as after f5. But he's saying, mate, my queen's on the 7th rank. It's fine. You just don't have enough material to really scare me. It's going to be very hard for you to break on g4. So I don't have to open up the position. You're biting on granite on f5. You're not going to take any with a piece. Come on. Who are you scaring? Not me. And so thinks it's worth it. There's really no threat. Black is basically saying, yes, I have these dark squared weaknesses, but I don't think you can do anything that would allow you to say you have an advantage. So another interesting game. There's a material imbalance here. Bishop and pawn for the rook. So will that be sufficient to generate winning chances? That slight edge in material? We'll have to see. And how is the beast mode continuing to play? Okay, so we got bishop h3 in. Where did we leave off? We left off with bishop to e5, or queen to e5 rather. And he says, you know what? There might be something I'm missing here because I would have played king takes g2. Um, but with just a cursory glance at it, let's assume that there was a reason that black played queen to f2 instead. One reason is he's attacking that pawn on b6, which is totally immobilized. That's the weakness of the doubled pawns. One of the weaknesses of the double pawns. So they cannot defend each other. And the backward one is immobile. And since a piece in a pawn's power is tied to its mobility, being immobile is being powerless. So what does black do? How do you defend that? Because he just played his rook over to e7, leaving it undefended. He says, well, you know what? I'll give you that pawn, and I'll protect the one on g2. Okay, how do you evaluate that? Now, obviously, it looks scary around white's king, but is it scary? The one thing you have to consider is there a potential break with f5 for black? If he can open up the position, then it would get scary. So does white have time for queen takes b6? Because then f5 comes in right away. It looks scary. I don't like to be scared. So, nope. He says, okay. If you play f5, I can just take it. Because my rook on e1 is protected by the rook on a1 and the queen on f2. So you'll be sorry if you play f5. Says you're right. But I can just increase the pressure on the e5. Because guys, that's pressure. Do you like it or not? F5's back in the business. Oof. What are you gonna do? Okay, so white's thinking now. Now time is like 20. It's almost 2-1, but it's 28 minutes for white and 15 minutes really for black. So white's got plenty of time to think and probably should think of what to do here. And rook e2 looks logical. Instead of f5, you can just take it. It certainly seems to me. E takes f5, hitting the queen. Queen takes e2. Bishop takes e2. I don't know. It's still kind of scary. Still kind of scary. So now it's black's turn to think. Checking back here. Okay, this position is further resolved itself. Remember that g6 was played and white took, created that pass pawn on h6, and then the rook to f1 hit the bishop on. So how are you going to defend that bishop? This is okay. I'll do it this way. You know, and now I'm going to lift the rook. The rook lift is one of the things in chess that's a very common way to get your rooks into the game. Sometimes just shifting them along on the back rank is insufficient to get them in play. So often you move it to the third, or in this case, the fourth rank, in order to be able to shift it to another file. Because sometimes they trip over each other on the same rank. So sometimes the way to double them is like this, like with a rook lift. So you will hear the terminology rook lift, you'll see it in print. And this is an example of lifting the rook in order to shift it. Rook lifts to shift. So he says, okay, by the way, I'm pinning your bishop to the king. He says, okay, well, you know what? I'm going to interpose my rook. And now, rook takes. Now that pawn structural shift is still something to be considered there because there's good things and bad things to say about it now. The good thing is you moved the pawn from d3 to e4, so it's closer to enemy territory. And so the further these pawns advance, the more dangerous they can become, or they can become weak. Because once again, the pawn is isolated. No pawn can defend it, only pieces. And pieces generally don't like to defend. They'd rather attack. Now look at black's queenside. It's now a 3-on-1 majority, so it's only a matter of time before that becomes activated. And a pass pawn will, on c5, it's a protected pass pawn now. Protected pass pawns are better than just pass pawns because they can't be captured by pieces. And if they're pass pawn, means no pawn is in their way. Only pieces are in their way. If they're protected, they can't be captured by a pawn. So only pieces can capture them. If it's supported by a pawn, it's unlikely it could be taken by a piece. It's not impossible, but it's unlikely. So now, what black has managed to do is create winning and losing chances, which is exactly what she wanted. She really wants a win to get the IM norm. A draw would settle for the WGM norm, and that is no mean accomplishment, taking nothing away from that. It's just that you'd rather get the IM. If you had your choice, you would choose that. So, why not do both? All right, this is really, really another fascinating position. So the king's saying, you know, I probably belong on the king's side because white's creating pass pawns on the king's side, and in the center, yeah, I probably don't not need it on the queen side, and I probably am, you know, comparatively need it on the king's side. That looks clear. So white's saying, okay, all right. My bishop was biting on granite on that c5 pawn, so I'm going to give it a little bit more mobility. Not much more, but a little bit more. Slight improvement of white's piece placement. And that's where we are now. Oh, but white is very short of time. Black has 40 minutes. So, well done, black. You've caused white to think and think and think and think. Down to 42 seconds. Now it's an increment time control. So 30 seconds per move, but now white's going to have to kind of move quickly. And you never really want to be in a position where you're forced to move quickly. Of course, grandmasters like Walter Brown used to do it all the time. But generally speaking, the more quickly you have to move, the more anxiety you feel. And you don't want to have anxiety when you're playing a game of chess. You want to be calm, cool, collected. So this anxiety thing is completely underrated. You can create anxiety in your opponents, and you create additional winning chances. It's that simple. So it doesn't sound like a very nice thing to do to create anxiety, but you know, it's not always about being nice. We're taught to be nice. We're supposed to be nice, but you don't win a lot of chess games if your moves are always nice moves. Pretty moves can be good. Sometimes after a move is played, we say sweet. That could be pretty good. Sometimes we say nice, but we mean deadly. So let's see what's going back on board 4. Well done, black, by creating complications and problems for your opponent. All right. So we played we left off here. Black had just played knight to b3. Looked like he was going to say, okay, I'm going to have to give you back a pawn. So white says, I'll attack that pawn on d5. I'll ignore what you're doing and put pressure on your d pawn. And black says, okay, and I'll just take your knight. I won't give you back the pawn so easily. And bishop takes, of course, was forced. Now queen e6 protects the pawn on d5, and black has no immediate, or white has no immediate way of increasing the pressure on d5. But you notice the battery of heavy movers, straight movers on the g file from black is no longer there. So there's really no threat. King safety, white's pretty safe. So it's all about the extra pawn and the pawn structure and the quality of piece placement now. And it looks to me like black is saying, I've got adequate resources to defend that extra pawn. I'm going to hold on to it and see if I can leverage that into a win. And white is saying, I think it's insufficient winning chances. As a matter of fact, there's going to be some action on the queen side that you better pay attention to. So b5 is a very dangerous play. Now notice that the pawn on a3 is protected by the queen on f3, so nothing's hanging. And it's going to be very difficult for black to stop a4. But very good try to mix it up, to create some tension in the position. Okay, good chess, good game, very interesting. Good games all around, except on board 5, we had our Grandmaster draw, which we don't look down on. It's a long tournament. It's good of them to play, give other people the opportunity to win the titles. So here, where did we leave off here? I think we left off right about here. F5 had just been played. Very committal move, but it's also a confident move, saying you got nothing to scare me on the king side. And white says, well, that may be true. I'll play f4. King g7, it says, you notice the dark squares are a little weak there. I'll just cover them up a little bit. And whoops, what happened there? Don't know. I might have touched the wrong thing. Can happen. So we're back. Okay. Interesting. Very interesting. Let me move back to what I was just looking at. King g7. So I says, okay, you know, but those are kind of weak, those squares. They're weak. And so I says, well, I'm just going to set up this fortress so that you can't break through. Ha ha ha. He says, well, you know what? Because you're so weak on these dark squares, I'm going to put my queen on one of them. And guess what? I'm going to threaten rook takes pawn. So what are you going to do about that? Black. So I'll just move to h7. Now you can play rook takes pawn all you want. And if rook takes f5, g takes f5 is not possible. That would discourage me. So this says, okay, now I'm going to go for that break on g4. I'm going to break up the Yankees on the king side, and I'm going to get another piece into the game. I'm going to get my rook into the game. I'm going to make you rue the day you weakened all those dark squares. At least that's the plan. So good fighting chess on board 1. And I believe Austin has already made his I Am Norm tournament. He's clinched it, but he's playing on as though he's fighting. Okay, so where do we leave off on this one? I knew f5 was in the air. Rook e8 was just threatened. Rook e2 was played. f5 does work. It does work. I was wondering if it worked, and the answer is that yes, it does. Okay. So e takes f5 is out. Queen takes e2, bishop takes e2, rook takes e2. Where does the queen go? because you got to defend that E1 square from check. And how do you do it? You don't. So it costs white's queen to stop. Well done. So what are you going to say? Oh, okay. But I'm going to threaten to take it next move. Because now E takes F5 is perfectly playable. Would you like to give me a pawn? Not even now. E takes F5 could be answered by queen takes D5. Nope, nope, I'm wrong. That's not true. So black's got a little mystery to solve. He's got 5 minutes to do it. So white has 26 minutes, significant time advantage. Not time in terms of development, but time in terms of being able to think about your move. And you want to be able to think about your moves. Sometimes you can play good moves with scarcely any thought, but it's really to your advantage to be able to think and to spend time thinking before you move. Thinking after you move doesn't work as well. So think before you move, and you need time in order to think before you move. So let's back. Oh, this has definitely changed. The rooks have come off. Now I think we left off here. So black is saying, I would like to play the bishop ending. I think I have better chances in the bishop ending than the bishop and rook ending. And white doesn't have any time to really think, so he says, okay, this is simpler for me to play, find moves, so I'll be happy to do this. I'll activate my king, that's simple. And black is saying, okay, I need my king over, this will free up my bishop. And I have stopped your pawn advances. But now, in these endings, the king should be a fighting piece. And white's queen is much stronger, much more active, much more influential in the game's outcome than black's king. Black's king is worried about that advanced and passed pawn on h6. Says I really can't let you play h7, h8. And if I get over to the queen side, you just play something like bishop to c3, trade off the bishop and move h7 to h8, which would be a sorry state of affairs for me. Now, this is really getting tricky. Because I think the king position, all endings favor white. So king d5, g5. I'm thinking more and more, and white is playing quickly, so white is gaining more time. White is thinking now after g5, what should I do? How do I win this game? Because white is clearly better because of king placement. And this has gone from, I'm not sure who's winning to white is winning. Okay, that retreat after e5 was forced. Now you can see that black's making defensive moves, passive moves. This is not looking good. Sports fans, because can't the king just keep advancing? And I think, but you know, you can win that h6 pawn and sacrifice your bishop for that e pawn. You got 4 pawns to 2. Can you make trouble enough? I don't know. I don't think so. White's still winning. But white's thinking. White is using most of his time to think. He's got 30 seconds to move, though. So, yeah, king d6 is what I would have thought. Now, what about king h7? But then king h7, king d7. And if you play g4 to give the bishop someplace to go, that pawn on h6 is defended again. Looks really grim for black now. Oh, she's put up such a struggle. Such a good fight. But I think things are going, and it's when you get into the ending, you know, the active king, any ending, the more active king can play a decisive role. It's always true in king and pawn endings, unless there's a passed pawn that the king can't capture. But it's true in all endings. It's an advantage to have an active king. Sometimes, as it looks in this case, it can be a decisive. Because king d7 is a brutal threat right now. Because there's nowhere for that bishop to go. Yeah. So she says, I've got to have somewhere for it to go. But what about e6 right now? Threatening e7. e7, and lights are out. The party's over. Oof. White has to move pretty quickly, so I'm going to stay on this board because it can only take 20 seconds more before he loses on time, which he's not going to do. So how's he going to choose? I would choose e6. But I'm just that kind of guy. Okay, g3. Again, giving that bishop no squares to move to. Actually, probably an improvement over e6, although I hesitate to admit it. Because king d7 would once again win the bishop. Ouch. Oh, lordy. That's painful. All right. So I see how this is going to play out here. We'll take a look at board 4. Okay, where did we leave off? Oh, moves are being played right and left. So we played bishop, queen, takes, b5, 6, queen c3, rook to g3. So these are new moves and aggressive moves. You must give black some credit for aggressiveness, nothing else. Wow, how do you get out of that? By that. Okay, 3. And so if you're going to play here, that's 3 attackers and 2 defenders. Uh-oh. So he takes, and he doesn't take. He doesn't want to play that ending, a pawn down. He wants to play this ending, a pawn down. And so he's saying, now I've got what I wanted. Queen to a5, very scary. Well, black says, I'm calm, cool, collected, because I'm going to play queen takes pawn. But doesn't that allow this? And it does. But is that? No. I just play king b7. Now what? You can't save your queen and save your bishop at the same time. There's just no way. So you're going to probably have to trade queens, which is what black wanted. Black is saying, I'm a pawn up. Yeah, there it goes. Queens get exchanged. And your bishop on a7 is under attack, and black has 5 pawns to 4. Does black have a significant advantage? Yes. Is it enough to win? We'll have to see. Pardon me. Bishop d3, perfectly fine. Now you see that there is an issue here, like if c5. Not saying it's the right move right now, but c5 could play d4 and then c3, and you just keep coming. Ouch. And if c5, en passant, capture, b takes c, king takes c6, and then you're just clear pawn up. You got two protected passed pawns. White still has a protected passed pawn on e5, which will always give you chances. It's always good to have a protected passed pawn. He doesn't go for the immediate c5. He plays his rook there, because obviously rook a2 is not a good idea. Bishop c5 would be probably a sharp answer to that. So what do you do? What do you do? What do you do? And black has 6 minutes. White has 24 to 5 minutes. It's like time is not of the essence in either position. Black has less time, but is moving quickly. The position is getting clear. There's not going to be a lot of hard calculations, many variations. So it's easier to play moves more quickly in this type of position than a complicated middle game position, where going wrong can be deadly. And, so White's thinking, like, how do I save this game? It's not trying to think, how do I win it? He's trying to say, how do I save it? So edge to black. Great games. Really great games. Let's go back here. And so black set up a little fortress here. We left off at h3. And so black very reasonably says, okay, you know what? I'm going to go to h6 and just take away that queen, because it's a little annoying where it is. Don't like to be annoyed. So the queen goes back to f4. Says, yeah, I don't like you on f4 either. So queen says, okay, I'll go to f3. Says, I'm pretty strong on f3, by the way. So, okay, because the d pawn was under attack and has to be defended, and we know that pieces do not want to do guard duty. They just don't like it. So he's saying king to g2, because he said, I'm going to play g4 at my leisure, and then when the exchanges happen, I want rook to h1 to be there. So I got to get my king out of the way. So now white is looking like, I got exactly the kind of setup I wanted. And your two bishops, one's blockading a pawn. Rooks don't really like to be blockaders. One's defending a pawn. They don't like to defend pawns. So black is down to 15 minutes. White has 3.5 minutes. So neither is in time pressure, although time is starting to become a factor. But white's game is looking better than it has in quite some time. All right, let's check back. Okay, where did we leave off? F5, okay, e1, f takes, e4, rook takes. Now, all of these moves seem a little bit forced. If not forced, something like them are going to be forced. So white has said, okay, I'm just going to trade down. And guess what, guys? I'm going to win the ending. Now, it's a queen ending. Queen ending is notoriously tough to win. Black has 2.5 minutes, white 20. So black is going to have to move more quickly than white, but still not dastardly. Now, queen, the first thing I would look at is queen e1 check, king takes d2, queen d2 check. Yes, this is precisely what I would have played. Now, king h3 is the only way, because queen f2 allows queen takes d5 check. But can black play queen takes b2 now? Well, the question is then can I grab that d pawn and advance my d pawn and put so much pressure on you that you're just going to start to cry? So much pressure. Be the weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth. And that's what's happened. Queen takes b2, queen e6 check. Now you don't want to, you have to play king to h7 because you can't go to f8 because the queen takes would then be check. So now I have my choice between two pawns I can take. Yikes. So white is saying this advanced d pawn is going to be the decisive. So black chooses to take the c pawn. Now look at those doubled pawns on the queen side. You know, it's like you got a 3-on-1 majority, but it's really looking a lot like a 2-on-1. And it's going to take some time to develop a pass pawn on the queen side because those pawns aren't really helping each other. Now the king is tucked in on h3, but it's not totally safe there. Now it seems like if black can transpose into a king and pawn ending where he can cover the queening square, which would be d8 in this case, then his queenside majority would win the game for him. But can he do that? He certainly can't force it. White would have to allow it. And why would white allow that? Now, I want to call your attention that white can play moves like queen c6 now, because then black can't trade queens and advance the pawn to d6 by force. But then he's got to think, okay, are there perpetual checks that I would be giving up? Are there all sorts of problems that would cause? And it's because once I play queen c6 and d6, which I can, it gives black an opportunity to choose his best position to get perpetual check or to pick off pawns with check, and who wants to allow that? Very complicated position. White is thinking. White is thinking. So while white is thinking, in this complicated queen and pawn ending, the material is technically balanced, but it's very imbalanced, and the pawn on d5 is advanced and threatening, and the queen side majority of pawns 3-on-1 is potentially decisive if black can trade queens in the right time and that sort of thing. So this game is not decided either way, in my opinion, and from what I can tell. So having said all of that, yeah, this was unfortunately the case. After c4 was, after g3 was played, which was a very good move, better than my e6. c4 was played. What are you going to do? King d7. What are you going to do? This. But that's a desperation maneuver because, you know, I'm going to play, as soon as you get there, I'm going to play this. 1-0. Nice try, black. That was a great effort, great game. White hung on there. White was short of time. It took a lot of time to figure out how to handle the problems that black was setting. So an excellent game. Somebody did, it looked like somebody was going to win it. But it was a very close call. It was very difficult. And I wanted to just go back and call your attention to the decisive, the really clear, after f4, what are you going to do? She said, I'm going to mix it up. And it's okay, but I'm going to, you know, I'm going to cause trouble on the king side. I got more space. And then this move. This was really interesting position to me because there's such tension in the center and how it got resolved. It's very interesting. And the way it got resolved, basically the spatial advantage that white had proved decisive because the king couldn't be in two places at once. It couldn't be both on the black king couldn't be on the queen side and the king side. But white's, because of the space advantage, white's king became more mobile and the mobility of the white's king to penetrate deeply was the decisive difference in that game. So king placement was the most important difference in that. But very, very well played on both sides. Okay, so now this has become increasingly clear that everybody's playing for a win. Oh, this is so interesting. All right. So now we have, let's see where we left off. We left off at rook a2, I think. Rook a8, rather. And then let's see what happened. King f2, reasonable. Bishop there, reasonable. g4, aggressive. Very aggressive, and might be, and probably is, the best try in this position. You can take it, absolutely, but then my pawns start rolling. So now I'm down 2 pawns, but that pawn on h6 is kind of weak. I'm threatening f6. Threatening to come storming in. Whoa. f6 followed by e6, and who knows what's going on? Who knows what's going on? Marvin Gaye? I'm not sure. Should be check, king h2. And now black has 2 minutes left. Can't take a long think here. h5. You hang on to those, and you'd have 2 sets of 2 protected pass pawns. Or 2 sets of 2 pass pawns, 2 of which are protected. Looks good. But white is counting on the duo on e5, f5 being unstoppable. Like the bishop going to c5, say, covering the queen square on f8, and just playing f6, f7, f8. Oh, couldn't come in quick. Wow. This is cold calculation now. This is, John Fedorowicz told me once, this is all about counting. So who's more accurate counting? Because it's all about the number of moves that can be taken to queen, to threaten to queen. Because both sides have that possibility. There's no, if the rook comes off of c2, then, you know, those the pawns on d5 and c5, c4 rather, can become just as threatening as the pawns on e5 and f5 are now for white. So hard. But if it's all about counting, then it can be solved. Okay, he says, okay, not only do I want you to go, not only can you go to c5, I want you to. Wow. Gosh, golly. Miss Molly. That's a lot of pawns. If black wins 2 more pawns for a piece, he would have 4 pawns for a piece. Oh, so he takes there. He doesn't go to c5. Okay. So now he's saying, I don't want to play that ending. All right. Okay. Oof. Hard for me to say. It's tough for black right now. Don't know. Okay. Okay, that was the choice. Because rook h3, check, king g1. Oh, so hard to calculate. So hard to calculate. So, black is still a pawn up, but whose pawns are scarier now? Notice that f6 is met by bishop to g3 check, picking off the e pawn. So that's the real nasty behind rook to f3. So if you can't play f6, how do you protect it? The answer is you can't. So what can white do? e6, rook takes f5. Don't like that position. Oh, this critical position, white has plenty of time to think. I'm starting to think that black, because f6 is met by bishop to g3 check. Bishop takes e5. And that looks like a two-pawn endgame advantage, and that f-pawn is going to be lost. So I think black is winning. I don't want to go out on a limb. Let's predict that, but I did. Okay, so a lot happened here. Okay, queen f7. Let's say, no, this position has repeated itself. And here, 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 and here. And then here. So this is where we left off. Rook to d7. It's a good move for defensive purposes, but you know, the rooks are defending across the ranks. And they'd really like to be attacking on the files. If they're doubled along a rank, like the 7th rank, that can be very powerful. But defending along the ranks, it's not the same as attacking along the ranks. So queen f4 now is played again. Huh. Rook f7. Kind of asking him to play g4, aren't you? h4. Now I'm confused. I'm just confused. I don't know. I would have thought g4 would have been played. I don't know why it wasn't. But now this position is locked. So white is basically saying draw is good enough for me. How do you win this for white? I don't know. I think I don't see any black chances to win, and I think any white chances to win would create imbalances that may or may not favor white. It would be risky. Okay, a5. Again, locking the position potentially would be b4 next. We just clearly established that there's no way for black to penetrate, no way for black to win. But the same would be true for white. And I think a draw would be the logical outcome. Okay, a lot has happened here. Where do we go? Where do we go? Okay. This is where we king h7. This is queen takes, and there. So This was more prudent than queen c6, in my opinion. Cuts off the checks that white would want to play, and it allows the d6, d7 maneuver, which could be fatal. Turned out to be fatal. So queen c4. And pins the queen, the pawn to the queen, so d6 is not playable right now. And it attacks the a2 pawn, so it looks like a reasonable move. Queen f check, f7 check, g6, interesting. Whew. Queen f7 check. Once again, the pawn is pinned to the queen, but where is the black king going to go? He says, okay, I'll check you there. You'll advance, and I'll check you here. Ew, interesting. So white has maneuvered the position so that the queen is out of the pin, and d6 is possible, and d6 has been played. Okay, so black has under 3 minutes, but plenty of time in this 30-second increment to continue to think a little bit before moving. But how do you stop d7? Do you have any perpetual threats? Queen f1 check. King h4 threatens queen to h8 mate. You don't have time to mess around. King is not inside the queening square, so that pawn will queen if the queens get exchanged. Difficult problem for black to solve. Wow. And notice that queen takes a2. It looks to me like d7 is crushing them. As you always are threatening queen h8 check, king g5, then d8 equals queen check. And then it's all she wrote. Party's over. So this is introducing another possibility, which is g4 check, which I'm not sure solves the problem. But it does introduce the possibility now of queen f1 check, forcing king to g4 rather than h4, which will allow queen d1 check. So d7 would not be the right answer because queen check, queen takes pawn. So a very, very reasonable try. But it does look like we got to worry. You got to calculate. I'm sorry, but just have to calculate. Because queen f6 check would, if nothing else, take away the check on f1. So if you can play that, or even perhaps better, although I hate to say it, queen f5 takes away the queen check on f1, prepares d7, which would then be protected, prevents g4 check. It doesn't prevent it, of course, but g4 check is now less likely to be played. So without ability to check along the f1 h3 diagonal or the h3 c8 diagonal, how do you give check? only through the H file, but it takes moves to get to the H file, and even then, what's it give you? Just not sure. White's queen to F5 is an excellent move. Wow. Does the beast mode continue? What a performance by Balaji. This is on board 2. We had a very good fight on board 3. Ended in this position, and it was tougher than it looks. Very good fight. And this game is still ongoing. Where do we leave off? We left off at rook f3. I couldn't see a real good defense, so this seems reasonable, doesn't it? Of course. I'll take that pawn, but now I'm attacking your bishop. Okay, but now I've gotten rid of your scary pawn duel. My bishop on e7 is blockading your pawn on e5, which I'm threatening to take. And I still have 3 pawns to your 2. And I'm going to play king b6, which might threaten king takes. And b5. And somehow, some way, if I can get my pawns to c4 and d4, I got a scary pawn roller of my own. And black has won the game. White has just resigned. He's saying, yeah, because you're also threatening rook to h5 check, picking up the bishop. So you got to take time to move your bishop. And where do you move it? That can protect that pawn. Okay. All right. It's getting tough, and it's only going to get tougher. So I don't want to stick around while you keep hurting me more. All right, so great game by black. Great win. Congratulations, Kirk, who's already clinched his IM norm and just puts the icing on the cake, getting more rating points, which often come into play. So that's our second decisive game, and the totally understandable Grandmaster draw on board 5. The rest has been fighting chess. 2 decisive results, and here we are back on this, which I did not see how was going to either side was going to generate winning chances. Now the c4 is a possibility now, but then what? I don't know. I can't see black breaking through at all, so I think black has no winning chances, and white's winning chances don't look very promising to me. Yeah, so if you play to king c5 and king b4, what do you do? Just repeat positions? I think this game will be a draw. I haven't changed my mind. We'll check back on it. Fighting chess, though. That's no Grandmaster draw. Okay. So we left off what I thought was an excellent move. Queen f5. And queen e2 was played, which sets up a possibility of a perpetual of the kind that may or may not actually occur, but it, queen h5 check and queen e2 check, and it'll be interesting, be fascinating to see what that could possibly. But he says, no, I'm going to play queen f6 check. I'm going to take your king is moving there to protect the g pawn, obviously. Oof. And now you don't have that check, but you still have the check on f1 if the queen gets off the f file. So how am I going to make progress? So I'm going to stay on the f file. Okay. Oh. So you don't have to check on h5. You don't have to check on f1. You got to throw that check in. Okay, let's move back. Let's move those back just a little quickly because it's time. Time is of the essence now. So D7. I'm going to queen. There's nothing you can do about it. Oh, yes, there is. There's this. Going to force you there. Then I'm going to take here. Force you to take there. Now I can go back to queen to E2 check. Okay, so he says I'll hide here again because you got nowhere to check me. So black has 2.5 minutes to think. Okay, I'll just play queen to E4. Well, I kind of don't think that solves the problem. Seems like queen f8 check. Well, just queening seems like. Queen f8 check and queens. Okay. Oh, that's lights up. Party's over. Good game, black, but white's game was stronger. Fantastic tournament by Balaji. Just a fantastic result. GM result. Wow. Looking at all those decisive games, and when you want to get an IM and GM norm, you've got to win. You can't take a bunch of draws and still get your norm. So you've got to have many more wins if you're going to have losses, and everybody loses, right? But sometimes you can string together several wins and just everything else is a draw. You could do it that way. But if you get an occasional loss, like Balaji had one loss in this entire tournament, 9 rounds against super strong players, one loss, and he strung together a bunch of wins and a couple of draws here and there. But man, impressive play. Very, very impressed. Certainly a deserved title. And once again, congratulations to all the people who have put this event on. It's absolutely wonderful to see it return to the Bay Area, the opportunity for strong players to win IM and GM norms and eventually get their IM and GM titles and still be hopefully local players. This is incredible, incredibly fun to watch. So we have seen now 3 decisive results, and this game is the only one going on, and I think it is a draw. But they're playing on, so they're not willing to agree that it is a draw. And at least agree with me that it is a draw. But I don't see anybody trying to make progress. C4 seems to be the only way to proceed in order to try to make progress. And I don't see that creating winning chances for white. Or still probable draw, and some winning and some losing chances will be introduced. So I'm not sure what to tell you. This is the last remaining game in this wonderful tournament. We don't show this result yet, but we do know that it was 1-0. So 1-0, 1-0, 0-1. So black has 1 win, white got 2 wins, and I think the other 2 games, one for certain is a draw, and the other one I think is a draw. Speaking the editorial we, I guess. But I don't see how you make progress. I see more moves that just kind of repeating the same type of position without making progress. Unless white wants to commit with C4, I don't see any other possibility of making progress. So is white going to decide to do that? Yeah, because shifting rooks back and forth, black knows there's no penetration of squares or no penetration possibilities. So black would accept a draw if ever white offered it. But here again, we count the pawns: 2, 4, 6, 7 for white, 2, 4, 6 for black. So white has 1 pawn up, but he's also down the exchange, a rook for a bishop. Rook and pawn and bishop are generally not considered to be full compensation for a rook. On the other hand, in this kind of position, they're obviously adequate compensation. I see that there just doesn't seem to be any way. Sorry, Siri is talking back to me. Just don't know. I confess that I don't know. And I may not stick around for the end of this game if they're just going to continue to try to outlast each other and see who can put up with more, who has the most stamina, who gets bored first and makes a mistake. If white tries to break with c4, I can stick with it, but if it's just more of the same kind of maneuvering, I think we'll just call it quits. But what a great tournament. Again, shout outs to Mission 360, Barrier Chess, and Cal Chess for making this all happen. Tom Langland was the tournament director, and you have to be a specific class of tournament director in order to be able to direct a tournament of this magnitude, where IM and GM norms are possible because you're not playing just by the United States Chess Federation moves, US chess requirements and regulations, but also by FIDE. FIDE is the world governing organization for chess. And so their regulations are somewhat different, a little bit different. You play by their ratings, not the national ratings, but by the international ratings. So these players are competing to get their international ratings to a certain level, 2400 to be an IM, 2500 to be a GM. And you have to have norms. You have to do it. You show that you can do this performance, this level of performance at 3 different tournaments. And so if you achieve 1 IM norm, you don't get the IM title. If you achieve 2, you don't get the IM title. If you achieve 3 and you get your rating over 2400 FIDE, then you do get the title. And there is a qualifications committee that takes care of that. They do the checking and they look at the paperwork that's submitted on behalf of the players and they say, oh, Tom Langland signed off on this. Okay, check. They approve it. And if they say, oh, Jim Meade approved it. Hey, wait a minute. Let's do some more research on this. Who's this Jim Meade guy saying that so-and-so achieved an IM norm? So you have to have this title as a tournament director as well. So pulling all of this together, and as I mentioned before, you have to have multiple federations. You can't just have one single national federation involved in a tournament like this. You have multiple federations. This is a little bit easier to pull off in a place like Germany, where France, Italy, and Germany are so close to each other. In Europe, where you can just go and get players from other federations much more easily. But the United States is a big country. Canada is a big country. And so we have more difficulty getting people to come here from different federations. And so it's an achievement to put this type of tournament together at all. So it's a tip of the cap to all of those who have been a part of making these tournaments happen and bringing IM norm tournaments, GM norm tournaments back to the San Francisco Bay Area, to Northern California. And CalChess is the Northern California State affiliation. It's an affiliate of the United States Chess Federation, the national governing organization for chess. So tip of the hat to CalChess and all the support that it's given. So now White has made a decisive change in his approach. He says, okay, I'll bring the king over here to the e3 so it can guard in case you want to do any wild sacrifices like g5 and then just try to run either your f pawn or your h pawn down. I'll take action there, and I will prepare the c4 maneuver by playing my rook to c1. So he is going after it. He's not just repeating moves now. He's got a plan. So interesting. So we will stick around for a little while longer and see whether c4 is played. Obviously, c5 is not to be desired because then the position would be locked. And after c4, are you threatening to take on d5 and then you would have a 2-on-1 majority on the queen side? Would black take on c4? No, it's not the way I would tend to think I would play it, but who knows? Maybe. Can he move to c4? Take. Then the rook down to, what are you aiming for? c8? So we get your rook to c8. Yeah, I can see how you would think your winning chances there. But what if black plays rook to g8? Says he can't penetrate there. But this is a sign of progress. So we're going to hang on for a little while longer. White definitely has a plan. Okay. We're getting some questions here. Does Balaji have the rating necessary? I don't know the answer to that question. So I will decline to offer an opinion. Because let's look back. Here, I only see the titles. I do not see the ratings. And Balaji clearly got a GM norm and clearly increased his rating because this is a marvelous result. And apparently, this will be his third GM norm, which would be enough to win the title. The only question then is this rating, FIDE rating over 2,500. And if it is, all that criteria is met. When Tom Langland submits the paperwork, he will be given his GM title. So some quicker minds than me can research that. Because if he's close, if he's like 2490 or something, this tournament would put him over. No question in my mind. So, yeah, that's what I expected, but now c4 has some threat because c takes d5. If c takes, then rook c6 can cause problems. It's worth playing on. So white is trying very, very hard to win this game. So the tip of the cap to white. Bryce Ticklin. So I'm getting a notice that 6 norms have been achieved in total in these 3 very productive tournaments. So again, an organizational tour de force, very well done. 6 norm tournaments in 3 tournaments. So this has been quite an accomplishment, and very proud of everybody that had a part of it. It's really something special. Now, the other option, do you play like rook to c8 here and answer c takes d5 check with king takes d5? And say, guess what? There's nothing you can do to make me worry about my c-pawn. Just nothing. You can't put another attacker on it. You just can't do it. You only put one attacker at a time on it, and I'll just keep my rook on c8 and move the other one around. It might be a defensive resource. So Balaji's rating is really close, and this has got to be putting him closer. I wonder, I'll check. No, I'd have to check on his FIDE rating, right? So no one is helping me. My producer's not helping. I know, he's not paid to help. That's what he just said. It's not paid to help. How do you like that? Okay. Okay. Directory FIDE. Enter name. ID. Okay. Oof. Yeah. Okay, so now I think white has made progress. Because rook c6 check is definitely something that I was worried about. I was thinking he might get away with playing his rook to c8 and king takes d5, but that has not been played. This, I think, is a reason to play on. I think, like, if you can win the d pawn now, it's uh-oh. And once you call uh-oh, gosh. I think black has made a mistake here. I think there is a better way to defend this position. But let me look at, I am going to have to write down the spelling to look up his rating. Okay. Now rook d6 just looks like it wins. Wow. Okay. I just can't do this. Two things at once again. Oh, I see. Okay. 2463. None of these tournaments have been rated, but he has FIDE going in to these tournaments. He had a 2463 rating, which is insufficient to be Grandmaster. So question is, will he get it to 2500? And I think there's no doubt in my mind that he will. Okay, so now there's no penetration squares along the C file for the C8 rook. So I don't think and black is just taking his time. He's going to take the D pawn at his leisure. And, you know, then he can play rook to C5, D5, D6. I think it's crushing. So I say white is going to win this game. Going out on a limb, I know, but I think it's true. Well done, White. I was just about giving up the ghost and thought it was a draw. And you found a way to break into the position. You played around for a while, and I thought you weren't going to play c4, but you did. You prepared it properly, and you played it, and you got the win because of it. I do think Black could have improved on his defense, but Black didn't have a whole lot of time to think. So this is, again, the increments give you a chance, but it's only 30 seconds. So you've got to keep moving. And when you keep moving and you're under time pressure and under pressure from your opponent on the board, it's very difficult to find the right move each and every time. And we all know that 40 good moves can be ruined by a single bad move. So this game is going to continue on. I think it's clear that White is winning. So I'm going to sign off and wish you all good chess in the future. Now, again, I think rook c5, d5, d6 is just going to be too difficult to hold. But I wish you all the best. Hats off again to all the organizers, to Tom Langland for being the tournament director, which, the players have to play these games, but the tournament director usually has to do setups and breakdowns and has to be there during the games the whole time. So it's a question of stamina for everyone involved, all the players, the tournament directors. And I think what we're going to do is stop sharing the screen and say this has been James Eade from the Eade Foundation. The Eade Foundation is building communities through chess all across the world. And it doesn't matter what country you're from. It doesn't matter what language you speak. Chess is a way to build a community. And if you can't afford the chess equipment, to start a community wherever you live. That's where the Eade Foundation comes in. So let us know if you need help. And go to the Eade website, eadefoundation.org, and there's a donate button there to help us help them. Thanks very much.